Welcome to the Local Housing Strategy Briefing on Main Issue 4, Homelessness and Housing Options. It considers the extent and nature of homelessness across the Shetland Islands and the impact of advice, assistance and support in preventing housing crisis. It looks at how the Rapid Rehousing Transition Plan aims to transform the delivery of homelessness services in Shetland, including the provision of temporary accommodation. It examines the support needs of those at risk of or experiencing homelessness and considers the role of housing support services in sustaining housing outcomes. The local housing strategy will set out the vision for housing supply and housing services in Shetland over the next 5 years. To build a new local housing strategy, Shetland Island councils and partners must set a new vision for homes and communities and set out priorities for action to tackle the main housing issues locally. Based on analysis of the local housing system in Shetland, it is proposed that the new local housing strategy is delivered around the following 4 main issues. 1. Housing supply and placemaking. 2. Housing condition, energy efficiency and fuel poverty. 3. Promoting independent living. 4. Homelessness and housing options. This briefing sets out evidence, insight and questions on the key issues which will influence decision making on housing options, information and support. This briefing on homelessness and housing options sets out the evidence and facts on tackling housing crisis and promoting homelessness prevention in Shetland. It sets out a starting position for decisions on how the new local housing strategy should enable the delivery of the Rapid Rehousing Transition Plan and further investment in prevention and support activity. It raises questions and sets out the evidence on the profile of households most at risk or experiencing homelessness in Shetland, the extent and nature of homelessness in the area, the effectiveness of the homelessness prevention activity in reducing housing crisis, the role of temporary accommodation in alleviating homelessness, the potential for a rapid rehousing approach to transform homelessness services in Shetland, and the need for and role of housing support services in enabling housing sustainment. In 2021, 85 households made applications for assistance under the homeless legislation in Shetland, down 17% on the previous year. Whilst this reduction is in keeping with recent trends, the significant reduction is likely to have been influenced by the global pandemic. On average, over the last 5 years, approximately 111 households have sought assistance under the homeless legislation each year. The vast majority of homeless applicants are single people, 86%, with 62% of all applicants coming from single men. Over 2/3 of applicants are aged between 25 and 59. 12% of applicants lost contact or withdrew their application last year, which is higher than the rate for Scotland. At any one time, roughly 80 to 90 homeless households in Shetland will be residing in temporary accommodation. The main reason for homelessness in Shetland in 2021 was asked to leave current accommodation, experienced by almost 30% of people who approached the service. Beyond the main reason, 1 in 4 households left their accommodation following a relationship breakdown, with a further 18% experiencing domestic abuse. 81% of applicants were assessed as unintentionally homeless and in priority need for rehousing. 4% of applicants resolved their homelessness prior to the assessment process fully completing. Rate of withdrawn applications is significant at 11%. The average time to discharge the homeless duty from application to final outcome in 2021 was 67 weeks, which is almost twice the Scottish average at 35 weeks. This is also an increase on the 2019-20 levels at 51 weeks. 68% of homelessness households secured a positive housing outcome, including accessing a Scottish secure tenancy, the private rented sector, or returning to their previous accommodation. In 2019-20, 153 households approached the Housing Options Service for assistance with homelessness information, advice or assistance, which is 14% lower than the previous year. The majority of this group were already experiencing housing crisis, with 68% having had to leave their current accommodation or household. Just 10% approached the service for advice and assistance with a future housing problem, much lower than the proportion in Scotland at 38%. This indicates there may be a need to encourage engagement at an earlier stage to enable prevention interventions to be more successful. 14% of those seeking assistance from the Housing Options Service were supported to access social housing as an outcome of their engagement with the service, with just 7% enabled to remain in their current accommodation. Homelessness prevention activities focus on making a homeless application, 46%, or on housing information and advice, 43%. Two-thirds of households who approached the Housing Options Service went on to make a homeless application. In June 2021, there were 79 units of temporary accommodation across Shetland. The vast majority of temporary provision, 73 units, is located in the Lerwick and Bressay housing market area and is focused on the provision of one-bedroom or shared accommodation spaces. Most units are self-contained and in the ownership of the Shetland Islands Council, 56. Whilst there is no hostel accommodation, there are 3 licensed HMOs which offer 23 places with shared tenancies. Bed and breakfast accommodation is only used sporadically and for emergency situations. In 2021, there were 80 placements in temporary accommodation compared to 86 in 2019-20, at a cost to Shetland Island Councils of £429,000. The average length of stay in temporary accommodation was 379 days, higher than in the previous year at 299 days. This is almost double the length of stay in temporary accommodation in Scotland, 199 days. Shetland has the third longest length of stay of all Scottish local authorities. Despite a reduction in homeless presentations over the last 5 years, the length of time in temporary accommodation is particularly high in Shetland and has increased over the last few years. Reasons for this include the imbalance of stock and demand. Over the last 5 years, over 70% of homeless applicants have been single people, with the majority requesting Lerwick as the only area they wish to be rehoused. To overcome this, the LHS must ensure that future housing supply is of the right size and in the right location to be able to provide permanent housing solutions and reduce the time spent in temporary accommodation. The vast majority of homeless households, 98%, were satisfied with the temporary accommodation provided, despite the extensive length of stay experienced. A major aspect of future strategy for temporary accommodation, a central element of the Council's Rapid Rehousing Plan, is to improve the speed at which homeless households access settled accommodation. About 60% of homeless applicants in Shetland have no identified support needs, which is slightly higher than the profile for Scotland at 52%. This means that the majority of homeless households in Shetland simply require access to settled housing to resolve their homelessness and to achieve a positive housing outcome. For the 40% who do have support needs, almost half, 48%, have underlying mental health issues, and 16% lacking independent living skills, and a further 8% experiencing drug and alcohol problems. On average, over the last 5 years, approximately 15% of homeless households have presented with moderate to high support needs and have required housing support to ensure that a lasting, sustainable outcome is achieved in settled housing. Over the same period, each year between 20 to 30% of homeless applicants have been provided with housing support under the Council's statutory support duty. Housing Support Shetland is a registered housing support service which offers support to homeless applicants to develop the skills to manage and maintain a home. The service provides support, assistance and advice to individuals with assessed needs, all with a view to maintaining accommodation and preventing homelessness. In 2020, the team provided support to 278 clients, which included 42 homeless applicants. For those 5% of households with multiple and complex support needs, it is likely that wraparound support services will be required to enable successful resettlement, and a new model of support has recently been launched in Shetland to meet those needs. The Recovery Hub and Community Network opened its doors in 2020 and offers integrated housing support, alcohol and drug services, which support harm reduction, engagement with treatment and movement towards recovery. A key focus on the service is on securing and maintaining settled accommodation. This person-centred approach offers a delivery model based around the Housing First model, which in a way is operationally deliverable in a Shetland context. The Health and Homelessness in Scotland report, published by the Scottish Government in 2018, tracked the homeless population across Scotland over a 15-year period from 2001 to 2016, mapping their engagement with NHS services. The findings of this groundbreaking research suggest that Shetland has a greater proportion of homeless people experience the trimorbidity of drug, alcohol and mental health issues. The average incidence of trimorbidity in the homelessness population across Scotland is 6%. In Shetland, the incidence is 8.5%, which is within the upper quartile of local authorities in Scotland and 2.5% higher than the national average. These findings provide insight into the complex nature of homelessness in Shetland, suggesting the need for a joined-up, multi-agency approach such as the Recovery Hub model, which fully integrates health and social care services in addressing the housing and underlying needs of those facing housing crisis. In Shetland, the principles of the Rapid Rehousing Transition Plan to transform homelessness service delivery focuses on a person-centred approach, prevention of homelessness, prioritising settled accommodation for all, responding quickly and effectively whenever homelessness happens, joining up planning and resources to tackle homelessness. Since 2019, the Shetland's Rapid Rehousing Transition Plan has been successful in delivering a range of actions aimed at improving temporary accommodation provision, easing access to settled housing, and improving housing support services to those who need it most. Key achievements include ending all private sector temporary accommodation leases, implementing new allocation pathways for homeless households, flipping tenancies from temporary to permanent homes where appropriate, piloting new processes to take early action for households asked to leave their homes by their landlord or mortgage provider. A key future priority focuses on better alignment of the Rapid Rehousing Transition Plan and the Strategic Housing Investment Plan to prioritise addressing the imbalances in demand and supply, which prolongs homelessness for households in temporary accommodation. Actions such as focusing on the delivery of smaller housing units will ensure the right size of homes in the right places and speed up access to settled housing. This briefing for homelessness and housing options identifies a range of key issues which should be given careful consideration in the development of the new local housing strategy, including evidence that the number of homeless applicants have been declining over the last 5 years, evidence that whilst a good proportion of unintentionally homeless households achieve positive outcomes, the average time to resolve homelessness is double the national average. Whilst the impact of the Housing Options Service is positive, the majority of households are engaging at a stage when prevention work is no longer possible. Encouraging early engagement on the underlying causes of homelessness in Shetland should be considered to enable preventative interventions to be more successful. Whilst most households in Shetland do not present with housing support needs, a significant minority have complex needs and require integrated housing, care and support interventions. The Recovery Hub offers a good example of a multi-agency wraparound support model. A key future priority focuses on better alignment of the RRTP and SHIP delivery plans to prioritise addressing the imbalances in demand and supply which prolong homelessness. To build a new local housing strategy, Shetland Island councils must prioritise the main housing issues that need to be tackled to set local priorities that will guide action, partnership and investment moving forward. This briefing has focused on homelessness prevention advice and assistance in Shetland, presenting evidence on the extent and nature of the problem and progress in tackling it over the last 5 years. The purpose of the LHS conference is to finalise the main housing issues that require intervention in Shetland, examine the main issues in detail and generate ideas for action and investment. Key issues for consideration in the Homelessness and Housing Options workshop are: is tackling homelessness through housing options, information and support a continued LHS priority? What are the main challenges we face in tackling homelessness and improving housing sustainment in Shetland? And what has been proven to work? And what are our priorities for action?